thing that I would underline would be, in relation to the society, would be polygamy, for example. As you may know, in Senegal, polygamy is something very common. In other words, having the fact of having 2 wives or having, 3 wives or until 4 wives, is something very recurrent, something that is part of the daily life. Of course, it finds its explanation in history, because in history, people needed to have many hands, like many children, to be able to work the land. Therefore, the importance of a man depended only on the numbers of the valid people who could work, could be found in the house. Therefore, before Christianity, before Islam, polygamy was something already existing in my country. And then, of course, most of us, are from polygamic society, polygamic family. My father had 2 wives, and my mom is the senior wife, and my aunt, I call her aunt because I owe respect to her, the same respect that I owe to my mother. In other words, there is no difference in terms of consideration that I grant to my mother, or than to my aunt. And for the kids also, they are all my brothers, What I have to do, the help that I have to give to my own brothers from the same mother and the same father, it is the same help that I'm expected to give to my other brothers. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that at the social level, the organization of the society is different from my place and that of the United States. Because to fail, not to be able to fill the expectation that I expected from the society, to help my brothers, or if I try to help the brothers with whom I come in from the same mother and neglect the other, I will be punished, not by the police stations, not by any other institution, but I will be punished by the society itself. The society will look at me in a way that I will not be able to live in the environment. And if I can't live in the environment, knowing that everybody belongs to a particular group, if you reject it in your group, then you have a problem finding a group in which you will insert yourself. Therefore, the only thing that you can do is exile, leave the place. And if you leave the place, the problem you will be having is to go to meet other groups and to be willing to integrate. But they will ask you, why have you left the other group? And then you will have to give the reasons. If it is because you failed to fulfill one of the expectations that helps to maintain the social stratification, you will not be able to integrate in any group. And this is one of the punishments that the society can give you, which is more painful than prison or any other institution's punishment. This is one element. The other element would be maybe, let's see, in terms of education. It is compulsory for, knowing that the most population of Senegal is Muslim, like about 90% of the population is Muslim. Before going to school, I have been to the Quranic school, That is the religious school where you have to read, the Quran, which is the book of the Muslims. And in doing so, being a child from 2 to 3, you don't understand, but what they do with you is to bring you to memorize. Then you start memorizing, before going to the public school, like the European school, to learn French or to learn any other language. Therefore, generally, before going to school, most of the population, of Senegalese people, have already been to the Quranic school, and therefore they are used to memorizing. In general, that's why when they come to school, as in the primary school or at the secondary, they don't have any problem in terms of lessons because they are already used, to memorizing. And lately, it has been shown in West Africa, some studies have been done why you know, at the level of memorization, Senegalese people are more advanced. And it has been, the results have shown that it's because of the basic religious teaching that develops, you know, the component that is related to the memory. And of course, which has, you know, some implications in the daily life of the people, because religion always, you know, the belief in one God, you know, is always, no matter how educated the Senegalese person is always, you know, with the belief of, you know. Of course, in terms of religions too, it would be very interesting to mention animism. As you may know, Islam, you know, Christianity, you know, and all other religions are foreign religions, you know, in Africa in general and in Senegal in particular. If my mind serves well, Arabic people in the 10th century were the first to legalize slavery in the 10th century. And then Europeans started with le commerce triangulaire, the triangle business, I would say. Therefore, both religions, Islam, you know, and Christianity, you know, could not fill the expectations, you know, of my people, who had before that animism, which was the belief of the existence of different gods. The god of the earth, the god of the trees, the god of the sky, you know, it's different gods that leads to one original God. And of course, because of that, when Islam came and Christianity came, they have been adapted, you know, to the environment, you know. Therefore, we're not fanatics, you know. We don't. There is no religious problem like religious tensions in my country, because despite Islam and Christianity teachings, we are all rooted to our cultures. Therefore, what we do now is what we call religious syncretism. That's a mixture of our own practices, you know, in addition to the positive aspects, you know, of the religions. In other words, we don't have religious tensions as the one that exists in Algeria or some other parts of Africa, because, you know, religions for us should be a bedrock that should unite people rather than dividing them. This is at the religious level. Okay, and at the linguistic level, which is maybe my topic of discourse that I like the most. Yeah, I would say that it seems like very weird for somebody to speak about 10 languages, you know, but I mean, it's quite normal. If you take Kitten, you know, and bring her to, if she was born in Ziguinchor, the city where I was from, she would be like me. She would speak many languages. Why? Because human beings, in terms of psycholinguistics, you know, every human being is born with a predisposition to learn and acquire any types of language. The difference is that the environment plays an important role. In other words, when you come to school, you were taught a language. This is an artificial environment that is set by a teacher, and a teacher tries to teach you. Therefore, you use your brain to understand the target language, which is totally different from the natural linguistic environment. In Casamance, which is in between the Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, and Senegal, my friend knows the place. Now, we have people from the Gambia, we have people from the Guinea-Bissau, we have people from Senegal, and all of them meet in the city where I was born, which was the biggest city of the environment, which is Ziguinchor. And then having a friend means picking a new language. I had friends who were Manjak, I had friends who were Mangan, I had friends who were Mandingo, I had friends who were Balanta, I had friends who were Pepels, you know, and I grown with all of them. Of course, I would have to speak their language, because if I go to their house, they speak their language. If I come to my house, we speak our language. If I go to another house, we speak different languages. I've grown with that. And then, when I was 20 years old, I could speak over 9 languages, you know. not taken into consideration Arabic, English and French, which are, taught in school. To say that it's not really something amazing, but it's just something depending on the linguistic environment. And of course, knowing that I had, those languages, the field of linguistics became, my chosen field of work. And then, once at the university in 1991, I was in the English department. We had different options in the English department. We have grammar and linguistics, African linguistics. We have Commonwealth literature. We have American civilization and American history of thoughts. We have British literature and British history of thoughts. And we have African literature and African history of thought, and French literature and French history of thought. Those are options in the English department. But once you were an English student, when you were a sophomore, there is no distinction. You will have to do all other courses together. But once you finish that, when you register for your licence, for your BA, then you will have to choose, a specialization where you are going to focus your attention. And then I chose linguistics. And then I had my BA in African linguistics, option applied linguistics. And then for my master's too, since I was in the linguistic option, I worked in African linguistics in Mandinka, which was, the year that I finished. And then I was told, I was summoned by the department to do a test and to come to the University of Montana as, an exchange student and, a teaching assistant of French. And then that's how I ended up here, teaching, okay. And yeah, that's it. Yeah, in terms of linguistics, I think, this is one of the main reasons why I have chosen the field. In Africa in general, we have what we call language families. Most of you have already heard about Indo-European family, which is, like the forefather, what we call in linguistics the proto-language, of European languages, from which many languages have derived. We have the same phenomenon in Africa. We have three main groups, or language families in Africa. In North Africa, we have languages we call Afro-Asiatic languages. Afro-Asiatic languages. That's because North Africa is mainly populated by Berber people who are descendants of Arabic people and local people. Therefore, those are Africans mixed, some African languages mixed with Arabic, classical Arabic. That's in Northern Africa. In South Africa, we have Bantu languages, which is from when you go down the equator, all those people speak almost the same language with different dialectal varieties. You come to West Africa, you have the family Niger-Kordofan, in which Mande language, is the biggest subfamily. And Mande language is the same as Mandinka, is the same as Mandingo, is the same as Malinke, with different names, but referring to the same language. This language is spoken by over 17 million people, in that part of Africa. However, the people who speak that language belong to different countries. Some people are officially speaking English, like the Gambia. Some people are officially speaking Portuguese, like Guinea-Bissau. Some people are officially speaking French, like my country, Senegal. Although in all those countries, you can find an important population of people speaking the same language. And the problem is that those who were supposed to help develop those languages, who are the French, English, and Portuguese, would not do that, because to do that would be to participate in the eradication of their own language. In other words, fundings and other sources of scientific work in the field could not be done, although people know that it's something feasible. And that's why being one of the first in our option, because our university, which is the second university of my country, is a young university. And our option, we are the first to have our MA in the linguistic field. have chosen to work in African languages, especially I have chosen to work in Mande language families, to be able, of course, to find out a common writing system, which would help the people in the Gambia, the people in Guinea-Bissau, the people in Senegal, and the people in West Africa, who have been divided by European languages, to be able to write their own language and to write letters and communicate in their own language. And this is something realistic, which is doable, which we have started anyway, and yeah, we are doing our best to finish it anyway, although we have a problem of time, but this is one of the main reasons why we have chosen anyway the field of study linguistics. In short, well, I think, I don't know, but maybe if there are some questions I can answer, but I don't know. A lot of things to say, but I guess maybe questions would make me, know what to say. Otherwise, I would go in linguistics or, derive from.
Are there some languages that have already disappeared from your area or that are threatened to disappear from your area, like the Indian tribes?
Yeah,
Some of theirs?
yeah. But those are minor languages. If you take the case of Pepel, which is a language originated from Guinea-Bissau, but the population being not important, and with the influence of European languages, and African languages, Mandinka, many people have been transformed into Mandinka, or they have been transformed to adopt another second language, which in turn becomes their own language. And in Casamance, if we take the case of Bainung, they have been the first population of Casamance. Sorry. But they have lost the language because most of them have been assimilated by Mandinka people. Because Mandinka comes from Mandi, which used to be in the 13th century. The first West African historical empire. Have you heard about Sunjata Keita, who was a king? You have heard about Sunjata Keita. And that empire was the biggest one in West Africa. But when that empire was destroyed, many people, the generals, migrated to the south, to the west, the southwest of the coast. And because of that, they brought the language with them, and they did some conquests to those areas, and they implemented the language. And that's why the Mande language is well spread in West Africa. Bainung people have lost their language, and they have taken, Mandinka language. Therefore, the languages that are lost are minor languages, but important language families are still, containing important populations, in different parts in Africa. And I think, this is one of the key points that we should develop if we want to come to unite Africa, because these are linguistic predispositions that we can use, to realize the dream, be one.
Are you going to continue with the work on the Mandinka language when you pursue your PhD? Is that the same?
Yeah. For the time being, I have finished like the first project, and last week I typed two texts, of written Mandinka, and I translated the text in in English. The text that I wrote can be explained by the linguistic analysis that I did. Therefore, anything that you can find in the text, the explanation is present in the work itself. But this is just one project. This is to find out a writing system of the language. But it is different from to find out now the teaching systems to be used. To teach the people who already have the language. How to write the language. Of course, we have many teaching techniques, from the grammar translation methods to the most up-to-date method which is used in your universities, like audiovisual methods that we use in our. We have different teaching methods. Now, the problem is, when you teach a language, you have to know the needs of the student. If the student knows the language, and the other does not know the language, the teaching methods would not be the same, because the objectives are not the same. Of course, this will be another research project, which I'm intending to continue, because in the second thesis that is required by the department here, because they did not want to accept the first one that I did because they say that this is purely linguistics and I'm in the French department, therefore I should produce a document that is related to French. In other words, but that's fine. Now what I'm going to do is to compare French and Mandinka. Knowing that French is spoken in West Africa, in most countries, to compare those two languages would be to yield the differences that exist between two languages at the level of the vowels, at the level of the consonants, at the level of the supra-segmentals, what we call accent, rhythm, intonation. And then, once the differences and the common points identified, I can predict the difficulties that Mandinka learners who are studying French would have when they will be learning French, and vice versa. And then suggest some phonetic correction methods to be used in classrooms to teach a good pronunciation to Mandinka students and to teach a good pronunciation to French people who are learning Mandinka. And this is, I have started that lately, and I might finish that, in the summer. But of course, this might be different also from, what is for the PhD program is something else. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
I've heard some interesting history of the Wolof language, that it was originally a trader's language and that no one who is Wolof was originally Wolof. They all came from different ethnic groups. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, if we consider Wolof comes from a mixture. Because in Senegal, people would say, I am a Wolof, but in fact, if you delve back in their history, if you dig their history, you will find that they come from another language, from another ethnic group. You will find a Ngom, Ngom who is calling himself a Wolof. And Ngom is not from Wolof, Ngom is from Serer. You will find a Gay, you will find many people, who would refer themselves as Wolof, but they are not Wolof. The birth of Wolof is explained by Dakar. Dakar, Rufisque, this is the capital city of Senegal. We have Lebu, they are fish, they are sailors. They work they are fishers. I ask can we say that fisher? Somebody who fishes, who does the action of fishing every time. How do we call it?
Fisherman.
A fisherman, okay. They are fishermen. And those people are the first, to speak a language similar to Wolof. And of course, when they met the Serer, because Saloum, Dakar was surrounded by Saloum, Sin, and Jolof. And those three people were mainly inhabited by Serer people, Wallo, and Jolofs. And Dakar, Dakar first, the word Dakar comes from Dakar in Wolof, Dakar in Wolof means a tree. That's the name of a tree that is used, in cooking. For example, in couscous, in chere, you know what I'm talking about. we have a couscous which is different from Morocco couscous. I mean, the white one we use here. We have a couscous which is Senegalese couscous, and Dakar is a tree that is used, in the cooking of that meal. In that place, since when the European came, that's in the coast. That's the first place they met. That was a meeting point, like a market, where people would come from different areas to meet in that place, Dakar. It was called Dakar, but the French people could not write Dakar because the K, which is a pharyngeal sound unit, does not exist in the inventory of consonantal system of French people. Therefore, they write Dakar. Therefore, the K, which is pharyngeal, is replaced by K, and that gave the name of Dakar. And the population who used to come because of those business, settled, was supposed to find a common language. And then that's the languages that were in Wallo, Jolof, and the Lebu people that gave birth to Wolof now, which is the first language in Senegal. But in comparison to other languages, Wolof is only limited in Senegal and the Gambia, and peut-être, speaking French. And the Guinea-Bissau, because the population migrated. But Mandinka is more widespread. Yeah. Yeah.
You were in Toby's class?
Yeah.
Mama Toby's.
Toby, yeah, anthropology class, yeah.
You had talked about the animism as far as the medicine.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, and this is something I think we have in common with maybe Native Americans, you know. As I told you, although we are Muslims, you know, and Christians, you know, in Senegal, but we believe that in the power of the trees, you know. We believe in the power, like, not of modern medicine. Of course, we need modern medicine. But there are some sicknesses or some illnesses, you know, that the modern medicine cannot be able to heal, you know, in Africa. And then many people would go to the hospital. They would have surgery, you know, or they would, you know, use the most up-to-date materials to identify the sickness, but they would not see any sickness. Why? The person is suffering. But once the man goes to see a witch, you know, or a sorcerer, sorcier, how do you call it? A witch, not a negative witch, but a positive witch.
Healer.
A healer, okay? Once they go to see a healer, the healer would look at him and tell him to go, you know, and to come next. At the time that he left, he will talk to the spirits, and the spirits would identify, the sickness of the guy. If he can heal it, next time that the person comes, he will say to the person, this is your sickness and I can heal it. And this is the roots, you know, he will give him the roots of the trees, you know, that are supposed to heal. Sometimes if they can't heal it, they can see in spirit with their what we call the third eyes. You know, I don't know whether you know that or not. You know, with their third eyes, they can know who can heal the sickness. And they can give advice to the person to go to that person, you know, and they will give him an exact place where he can meet the man. And the man, if he comes, generally, people are surprised when you come. It is as if they have met you before. They will give you your name, they will tell you your sickness, and they will heal you. And generally, it's very quick, very quick. I have had some couple friends, you know, who had some troubles, you know. But generally, you know, traditional medicine, you know, gives evidence, you know, of healings. And lately, what the government was trying to do, because of the power of traditional medicine, they were trying to find out a common ground with modern medicine people and, you know, the traditional medicine. You know. And they would invite them in the television to talk, but they would always disagree because the paradigm, the theories are different, you know. But the modern medicine would, you know, base their analysis on concrete things, you know, while the others, you know, would use the third eyes, you know, or the third, you know, mind, which the scientists cannot believe. Therefore, they always end up, you know, divided. But most African people believe, you know, in the power of traditional medicine. Yeah, and as an example of that, most of old men, you know, they never want to go to the hospital, you know. And you can find, for example, in Senegal, an old man, you know, of 90 years old, you know. He's very healthy, you know. And when he gives you the hand, when he greets you, you know, you can feel the strength, you know, that he has. And he would be proud of never using, you know, modern things, you know. Of course, he cannot live without being sick. But they have always some roots, some bottles of roots, or some bottles of powder, you know, taken from the nature, you know, that they will use, you know, and works. The other thing is, you know, when a medicine man, when a healer is going to look for a medicine, a tree, for example, any tree has a healing property. But to access to that healing property, you have to know, you know, the language of the spirit that governs the tree. You know. Therefore, when they will come to take that root, you know, of the tree, they will have to speak the language of the spirit of the tree. And of course, that's you know, an esoteric science, you know, that you cannot know if you have not, you know, if you were not part, you know, of that group. Yeah.
What is the age expectancy in Senegal, usual age
Expectancy?
of life, you know, at what age do people usually die in Senegal?
Well, I guess, I don't know exactly, because sometimes people die early, but sometimes you can find very old people with 100 years or over. I don't know exactly, I don't know. But I know that in cities, you know, in the big cities, people die earlier than in the villages. You know, in the villages, people have longer life. You know, yeah. Because in the villages, generally, you can find very easily a person of 100 years old, very easily. My grandfather died when he was 127 years old. Yeah, and my father died when he was 56 years old. That's controversial.
Fallow, could you comment on, you know, from the Western perspective, the stereotypic image that all women in Muslim societies is high? So
Yeah.
could you talk about the status of women in your society?
Yeah, I think this is something very important, you know. Although many people think that, you know, African women are, you know, underestimated, you know, I think that's not the case, you know, in many points. We have different roles in the society, you know, but they are well considered in Africa, especially in Senegal. And there is a big saying, you know, in my country that says that if the son or the daughter is important or becomes an important person, it's because of the work of the mother. Liggéeyu ndey and liggéeyu yaay and doom. Which means that the suffering of a woman, you know, the conditions in which the woman works, you know, is always the result of the son or the daughter. Therefore, women are considered to be the mother of society, you know, because any important person, you know, has been a son or a daughter, you know, of a woman. And to support this point, it's very important to note that, for example, in Senegal, when you beat a woman, you know, you are condemned by the society. The police or the other institutions, once again, you know, will of course condemn you, you know, but the sentence of the society is more painful. But they will say, this man, you know, look at him, you know, he has beaten a woman, you know, who is supposed to be an important part in the society. And then, of course, shame will be always cast on you, and for that, many people avoid, you know, having problem with women. And the other thing is that in the house, for example, when you have two sons, like one woman, when the house has two boys, two children, one girl and one male. What is expected from the kid, from the boy, you know, is to be the one that is going to go out first, you know, to work and to bring, you know, the product of his work in the house. But the woman is supposed to be the one that should take the product of the work, you know, and take care of it, you know, in the house. Therefore, the roles are different. The woman works for the house, for the maintenance of the house and the kids, their education, while the man goes out, you know, to look for, you know, the things for feeding the house. In other words, the man cannot be responsible of the house because the man is always out. But the woman's role is to stay at the kids, to participate in the building efforts of the house. Therefore, the roles are different, and women don't feel to be marginalized, you know, in Senegal. No, they are always happy, you know, to be in a house to welcome people to educate the children. You know. Therefore, the role of woman is very important. And nowadays, the problem is with most intellectuals who have been to Europe, have brought the idea of feminism, which is now taking, definitely, which is now being, developed in Dakar, in the big cities, but still we have not many participants, because the conditions of women, they accept it, and they are happy. A woman is always happy to be the wife of a given person and to be the one that is always at home, to take care of the kids. That's what gives them pride, And I guess, we're in different contexts here, because here women do the same as men, because women go out to work too, and that's the basic difference. In Senegal, when you marry a woman now, even before, so far, when you marry a woman, even though you have the same salary, you were supposed to feed her, you were supposed to buy clothes for her, you were supposed to do everything for her, because that's what the society expects from you, I guess that might be different from here, right? I'm not sure. Anyway, but that's just to show you that that's the roles that are different, but they are not oppressed. No, they have the right place. Yeah. And in terms of education, the same education I was talking about, in my childhood, the Quranic school. I went to the Quranic school with my sisters at the same time. We went to school also at the same time. My sister decided to stop and to get married. I decided to continue. Have the same consideration.
For education, higher education?
Yeah.
Does your family have to pay for it, or is that covered by the country, or?
No, we don't have to pay because all what you have to do is, for any Senegalese citizen, your sons and daughters have the right to be educated. Of course, the education is very selective as you go ahead, because you have different examinations to do. And you cannot repeat a class twice, If you repeat a class once, then you are accepted for another year. But when you repeat the same class once more, then you were sent out of the school. And in that way, your parents, have to pay for you to continue your educations, and it's where they will have to pay money. But if you don't repeat a class, you can just go up to the university, without having to pay anything. And in return, you can have a scholarship, I had the scholarship from 1991 to 1996 when I was coming here, I had a scholarship. That was too small in terms of dollar, but that was very fine because I could live, without any problem, pay my rent, eat at the restaurant, go home if I want, and right. Yeah.
I have a question about the Mandinka languages.
Yeah.
About the sounds that don't translate into French or English or the other
Yeah. Good
colonial
question.
languages.
Yeah.
Are there a lot of occurrences of
Yeah.
these kinds of
Good,
sounds?
yeah.
Like-
Good question. Yeah. Because each language has its own sound system. Each sound system is supposed to be different, from another sound system. And of course, if you compare Mandinka, French, and English, we have many differences, although we have many common points. The example of that is if you take the sound system ng. For example, my name Ngom, Fallow, Ngom. That sound system does not exist in French, does not exist in English, although we have ng in English, like dancing. But we don't have the ng, in English. Of course, those problems are problems that we can find. But when we want to write the language, when we want to write Mandinka, at the level where there are common sound units, for example, a, t, d, we found the same sound unit in French, we found it in English, we find it in Mandinka. This is not a problem, then we adopt that system, okay? But when it comes at the levels where there are not similar sound units in European languages, then we devise, our own system that would account for that sound unit. Understand? And I don't have a talk here. It's why the ng sound, has a symbol, that we use for that sound. If you use the h, for example, in khalis, which is money in Wolof, h, we have h, which is a glottal fricative sound, what you call glottal fricative, because the air stream comes from the glot, the glottal, the vocal cords. You have vocal cords. The difference between the voice of a man and the voice of a woman is at the level of the vocal cords. You know a guitar. The more the cords are stretched, the more it becomes very aigu, and the sound, it becomes very. If you loosen the cords, it becomes bombastic, right? Because naturally it has been shown that the vocal cords of men, are loose, while that of women are, Now, at the level, I would just to explain the glottal sound, h comes from the glottal, But this is a sound you can find in English, you can find in French. That's not a problem. When we have a word like hajo, we take that h. But when we have a word like khalis, we have to devise, and then we have to use, another sound system to account for that. And in fact, if we do that, we have a repertory of sound systems which are distinct, from French or English, which can be used, for the codification of our languages. And that's the same with ny, have many systems, yeah.
Do you find differences just between the languages within the Mandinka, within the different peoples under that one language?
Yeah.
So how are you planning to link that up with the written language? Different sound systems being used?
Yeah. If you take French, if you take English, the English that is spoken in England and the English that is spoken in the United States, the difference is what we call dialectal variabilities, but they all can understand one another. Is that right? English people, Americans, they all can understand one another. Although the languages have color is written in a different way, some other words are written in a different way. The same thing appears in Mandinka, for example. The work that I was doing, I produced two texts. A text of Mandinka are spoken in Senegal, and a text of Mandinka are spoken in Guinea-Bissau. Of course, it's a political decision. If in my country, we speak Pakawungkang Mandinka. We speak Pakawungkang Mandinka, which is the biggest Mandinka family. In Guinea-Bissau, they speak a variety of the same, where nasal vowels are accepted. Where you have an, on, except killing, they would say killing. Bang, they will say bang. Nang, they will say nang. Those differences are explained by the fact that the n sound, which is accepted at word final position in Pakao, is never accepted in the other variety. And the other variety nasalizes the vowel instead of adding the sound ng. And this is a very small, dialectal variabilities. Of course, if they have to adopt one, we have in Senegal what we call Ministry of the Promotion of National Languages. In Guinea-Bissau, they have a Ministry of Promotion of National Languages. That's a political decisions, according to the population of the people that speak the language, and according to the, to the government, they might decide. But what is realistic, in between Senegal, the Gambia, and Guinea-Bissau, is to take Pakawungkang Mandinka, as the basic form that all of them can share. Because that would be easier to write, and that is spoken by more, the population is more important. Although the Guinea-Bissau people may say no, we want to maintain our nasalizations, and that will be, a political decision, but not a linguistic decision anyway. Yeah, good question. Yeah. That's what we call language planning and language policy. That's always political. Yeah. Yeah.
Any questions?
Yeah. You seem very rich in your culture and
Pardon?
community. You seem rich or
Yeah.
wealthy in community and roots and culture. And I feel like here in America, I don't have that sense, that I find it in my friends, that we find it in each other, and we find it when we go out into the hills. But as a community, we don't have it. So I wonder, when you return to Senegal, what you will say about the community here that you came to that made you feel rich. What will you share about your experience with pride of
The United
America?
States.
Yes.
It's a tricky question in a way. I don't judge generally, but what I do is just, I accept that people are different, depending on the geographical location, in which they are. In other words, my difference, is only understandable in reference, to the place where I am from. Just to say that the United States is shaped, by its history, by its culture, by its sociological environment. When I come as a foreigner in the United States, of course, I will have to bring some of my background, but I will have to adapt myself in the environment, to be able to survive. Okay. Once out, I will take back my old things and the positive things that I have taken from here. One of those things would be that I have to mention is, although I was not expecting that, I was not expecting like people to be very nice, to have the time like you were doing to speak to me, to discuss with me, etc. Because the view that I had of the United States was different, very different. What I used to see from the movie was New York City, the big skyscraper, the gangs, and shootings. And the people don't have the time. That's time for money, almighty dollar. That's the view that was developed in me, that I had before coming here. And I remember before coming here, some of my friends told me, boy, if you go pay attention because your students might shut you down. Yeah, And I actually realized I have not been to New York that much time to know that, but in Montana, anyway, things are fine. I have never been threatened in class. Very good, And this is something, here people are almost like Africans, People would always, stop me and talk to me, and discuss with me, etc., etc. This is something positive that I would find in Africa. The other thing is, I had lately, when my father died, I was alone, But just at a given moment, I didn't feel that I was alone, Because everybody did everything for me, to bring me home, etc. And the help that my own people would do for me, I found it here, In other words, beyond the prejudices that were developed by the media, by the other things, I find that there is a common point between human nature, that's human love, that you can find everywhere. Although you can find nasty people everywhere, but you can find good people everywhere too, And maybe I am lucky to meet only good people. I don't know, maybe I'm lucky. But I want this good luck to continue. so that, yeah. Anyway.
Well, you can have, you can stay around for a little while. Those of you who have to leave, feel free to do so.
Yeah.
You can stay about 2 minutes or so. More, Fallow?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Maybe some coffee more would be fine, huh?